Can you hear me? Everywhere? Okay. That was a great presentation. But I think that reflected the jihadist soldier, what's going through the jihadist soldier's mind. I'd like to discuss what's going through the minds of their generals. A general needs a different motivation, needs a strategy, and he needs to think that he can win. What is all this for? Why are they brainwashing a lot of young men in order to create havoc, chaos, violence, death? They tell us why. They tell us it's for empire. They want to resurrect an Islamic empire. They also have told us what formula this empire is supposed to take, which is the caliphate. Great. Now they have a huge problem. How do they go about creating this empire and bringing about victory as they see it? They have a problem in choosing a caliph. When Muhammad died, Prophet Muhammad, there was no clear-cut succession. Or at least a faction of Muslims thought there was a clear-cut succession, that he had picked an heir, and these people, 1400 years after that initial misunderstanding, are today called the Shiites, and the majority went through an ad hoc system, and today we call them the Sunnis, and they picked a caliph. A caliph, the word itself, means successor. Now that first caliph appointed the next person, the second caliph, and that was a president. However, what happened with the second caliph, who got assassinated, he appointed a committee. And this committee picked a caliph, the third caliph, who was also assassinated. And then it was factions and rebellions, big mess. Now the Islamists, these generals, the Salafists, they romanticize that early Islam, the Islam of the Prophet Muhammad, and specifically the three caliphs. Again, if we're counting, two of them got assassinated. It's a very unstable political system that they have to look back to in order to find precedent. Now, beyond the fourth caliph, who was also assassinated, we have a dynasty that's set up, and it's a bloodline now. This lasts through 100 years. There are lots of revolts too. The last one succeeds, and we have a new dynasty that comes in. That lasts another 500 years, and then, it goes through Damascus, then it goes to Baghdad, and then the empire in Baghdad is destroyed by a Mongol invasion, and sort of, for all intents and purposes, as far as the Islamists are looking back, they see the institution sort of peters out there. Now, this is very important. Why is it important? It's important because this is their soft underbelly. This is their weakness. This whole big enterprise that they're engaged in, that they're creating future generations of soldiers to fight in. All right, really, they have no blueprint to achieve. What's happening now amongst the jihadists in Iraq is that they're looking at this situation and they've decided to force the issue. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the organization that was created by Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, his heirs, his successors, have decided to pick what seems to be a candidate caliph. They've decided to set up a nucleus state for that empire. They're calling the Islamic State of Iraq. And they've picked somebody called Abu Umar al-Baghdadi. We don't know his real name, all right? But they've picked this person, and they're sort of dropping hints that this is the candidate caliph. They tell us he's the Prince of the Faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen, which is a title usually reserved for caliphs. And then they tell us something else, which is one of the very few precedents they have going that they can act on, that he is of the tribe of Quraysh. Those three caliphs in the beginning, and then that first empire and the second empire, the two dynasties, all go back to Quraysh, and they're saying that's enough of a precedent. If we can find somebody from that tribe, we can sort of have a candidate. Now, going back 1,400 years, the first time they had to pick a caliph, there was a huge split, Shiites and Sunnis. And today, what Al-Qaeda has decided to do by forcing the issue, by picking a caliph and trying to speed up history, they're also creating splits. Why is this useful to secular people or secular Muslims? It's useful because it's something we can point to and say, haha, doesn't work. This whole idea of politicized Islam, when you take it through its natural progression, when you take it through its most hardcore believers, is a dud. Can't launch. And when it does, it falls apart, as what is happening now in Iraq. So when discussing strategy, when discussing the mind, I think a lot more it's useful for the debate about separating Islam from the state is to point to is the best enemy we can hope for. This is an enemy that beheads people, plants bombs in marketplaces. This is a gruesome, ugly enemy that it jars at human sensibility. And at the same time, it seems that we can make the argument, all is for naught. I'll leave it there, and I'll take questions later.
Well, hopefully not all is for naught, because here we sit. Let me, before we begin questions and answers, because we have a little extra time, let me just say that one of the reasons I'm so passionate on the issues of this conference is because long ago I was once held captive in Afghanistan as a young bride, and I had no idea that I would be put in Peshmerga and what that meant. That means that from the early 1960s on, I have been very clear about not romanticizing third world countries, third world tyrants. I've been very clear about barbarism being indigenous to regions and not necessarily caused by capitalism or imperialism or colonialism, which may also cause, pain, but they do not cause the Islamic gender and religious apartheid that I saw. I saw how women did not enjoy being co-wives, how half-brothers were bitter rivals for inheritance and for father's favor. I saw how women mistreated daughter-in-laws and female servants, and I came to understand that people internalize the values of systems. When I came back to America, and so I had a very expensive education. And when I came back to America, I was able to see apartheid everywhere. And when Islamism began rising most visibly in the world, I began saying, wait a minute, I'm a universalist. I'm not a multicultural relativist. I have a single standard of human rights, which include Muslims as well, peoples of color as well. And my academic friends, the other members of the intelligentsia that I am representing here, they said, what you're saying is not politically correct. You better shut up. If you don't shut up, we will not publish you. We will slam your works. We will slander you as a racist, which has all happened. And I think that we need to be very brave, all of us, as Irshad suggested and as Ibn Mubarak has suggested, we have to be really very brave and be willing to be called racists and McCarthyites and reactionaries and the worst epithet, neoconservatives. We have to embrace all the epithets that demonize what true conscience and what true courage is really about. So now, let me ask for questions. I have many questions, and maybe the two of you have questions of each other. Let's hear some questions or even some answers from the audience. I think there's a mic so that everybody could hear you. Yes, sir. Where is the mic?
It's right there.
It's in the back.
Jay Tolson, U.S. News and World Report. Thank you both very much for two very illuminating talks. I would like to ask Mr. Kazemi a question about the appeal of the ideology and whether it really will founder on the sort of historical hollowness of the claim of the rightfully guided caliphates and of course the current mess in Iraq and the inability to even muster a kind of unified support for whoever this mystical figure is. I just wonder whether the appeal of modern Islamism isn't also largely based upon what Qutb brought to it, which was that sort of fascist, Sayyid Qutb, that sort of fascist, almost romance with death, and a sort of perpetual expansionist agenda, which, you know, I think Trevor Roper rightly said was the great appeal of Hitler's ideology. It's just, it really never has to make good on what it does when it gets there, because it's always getting there. So I have to say that I find Islamist ideology even more resilient than the hollowness of its original mythology. But I wonder what you think about that as well. Thank you.
You're absolutely correct. The seduction of that sort of extremism is very powerful, as we saw. And it also benefits from the fact that, you know, you don't have much to shop from in terms of ideas, in terms of lifestyles and hopes for the future. We have this huge demographic glut coming up in the Middle East. We have very scary numbers. 60% are under 20 in most of these countries. We have economies that are structured to serve very small elites, and these economies are not going to be able to absorb all these big numbers. We don't even have illusions like the American dream or something in order to distract people. You know, just there's nothing there for them. And at the same time, you know, technology is fighting more of an influence there, and they can see things. They can see music videos. They can see a lifestyle, a glamorous women, cars, all that, but they can't afford it. All these young men, and this is when something is going to click. At the same time, they're also getting through all these mediums, through the internet and through cell phones and video. They're getting this romanticized image of the struggle against imperialism, of the struggle against the regimes, against the tyrannies, of the young man, the individual, being powerful. You know, blowing up a tank, blowing up a Humvee, being unafraid of the mighty American military in Iraq, for example. All this is the selling points. And this, you're right, you're absolutely right. This is going to work for a very long time with a lot of young people in the Middle East. There is always going to be a lot of soldiers ready. However, the soldiers will need leadership. And this leadership, I think, is where we can look and say, this is where they're weak. This is where they can start falling apart. I was trying to make that point in between the generals and the soldiers. The generals are already fighting in Iraq. Now, Basically, if you haven't pledged allegiance to Abu Umar al-Baghdadi in Iraq, who's the head of the Islamic State of Iraq that was created by Al-Qaeda, if you don't pledge allegiance, if you're a member of these other jihadist groups, the Salafist groups that are operating in Iraq, then you get killed. In the very least, you're not even allowed to conduct operations against Americans or against the Iraqi government, because they don't want anybody taking credit for the jihad in Iraq except themselves. And now they're expending resources and personnel and soldiers in this war amongst each other. This is great news. This is what we should stoke.
Do you want to answer that question? Say something further?
Just I would like, yeah, I will try to. Thanks for the question first. I would like to add that what we think is in terms of the definition of the word success. Probably you mentioned that the practically the Islamic caliphate system or the trial to do it failed, like in Afghanistan or wherever. But this is from your point of view. But from a jihadist point of view, they look to the second life. They don't look here. So you think they failed, but they believe they succeeded to implement Sharia law and to make women stay in houses and to order them to put the burqa to cover their faces. So the whole concept is a relative issue here. You think they failed, but they think they succeeded because their target is up there in the second life, not the first.
Two very compelling points of view, because in a sense, if you worship death and view your purpose in being alive as in causing your own death and the death of infidels, then you succeed with death. But if you love life and have a different concept of what that means, then they're losing. Sir.
My name is Kai Alberg. My question relates to the reopening of the doors of Ijtihad and how we bring that out of this room and into mosques across North America and across the world. And specifically, my question relates to the role of the Hadith compared to the Quran, which contain many things that moderates and secularists would find unpalatable, such as the stoning of women, the killing of Jews, to a much more specific manner than the Quran itself. Now, many traditional Muslims would say that 3321, holding out Muhammad as the most perfect example of conduct, in effect would mandate that Muslims should also follow everything the Prophet did and said that is not written down in the Quran. Some others, a rather small minority, I think, would take verses such as 42:48, saying that it was Muhammad's duty only to be the messenger, saying, no, you should only look at the Quran, and what he did may or may not have been a good example, but it does not have the same level of authority. And I would like your views as to what one can do to foster more of a spirit of inquiry and perhaps getting Muslims as a first step away of following everything the Hadith said, which goes much further than what the Quran itself mandates.
Thanks again for the question. Actually, when it comes to the Islamic theology, one of the major problems that we have is the lack of theologically based peaceful Islam. For example, till now, as you mentioned, most Islamic books that are approved by Islamic universities or by Islamic systems all over the world teaches that we should kill the apostate, we are allowed to beat women, we should call Jews pigs and monkeys, we should declare jihad to spread Islam. It allows slavery, it allows killing gays. It's part of the traditional Islamic books. But what I want to say is re-understanding of Islamic text is the most fundamental step in the whole process, because till now we don't have a theologically based peaceful Islam. I will give you a simple example. When I was young, I took a verse that says, فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُم. Kill the infidels or the idolaters wherever you find them. And I took this verse to a Salafi, And I said to him, but we have peaceful verses in the Quran. The Salafi said to me, the peaceful verses are cancelled or abrogated because there is a concept called الناسخ والمنسوخ ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسيها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها, which means whatever verse we cancel or abrogate will bring better than it. So he said to me, it's cancelled, and he brought me tens of references to support the violent views. I went to a Sufi scholar called Sheikh Sha'ban, and I said to him, Sheikh Sha'ban, what can I do with this? Shall I go and fight and kill my neighbor? He said to me, son, just be good to every human being. I said to him, but Sheikh Sha'ban, it is written here in the Quran. He said to me, son, يَوْمَ يَأْتِي تَأْوِيلُ. It is a verse in the Quran that means in the day of judgment we will understand the meaning. So the Sufi didn't give me a clear answer either. The third one was the secular, my father and his friends. He said to me, oh, you should take the peaceful verses. And the answer was not also, was not theologically based. Later on in my life, I developed a new way of understanding this verse. And I said, all the verses in the Quran, for example, that speaks about killing or fighting the infidels, it says, kill al-kafirin or al-mushrikeen. Al means the in English, which defines the verse and the meaning. You can define it to the very early stage of Islam when they were fighting for survival, but you cannot apply it now. If the verse said, kill man kafar, means everyone who is infidel, then it is applicable to your neighbor. But there is no single verse in the Quran that says, kill man kafar. So you can have a new re-understanding of the verses based on Arabic language. And there are many things that are not written in the Quran, but it's part of the whole theology, like killing the apostate is not in the Quran. Stoning women to death is not in the Quran. It is in other parts of the religion called Hadith of Al-Bukhari and others. So we certainly need, this is the first step, a new understanding of the Islamic text, which is certainly possible. And I'll give you a last example here to allow the concept of human rights, for example. They are totally contradicting to Sharia system. To be honest, they are contradicting the Sharia system. But there is a verse in the Quran that says, in Surah Al-A'raf, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرُ بِالْعُرْفِ. أُمْرُ بِالْعُرْفِ means command the Muslims to follow what is commonly accepted by humans. And now you can take this verse and say what is commonly accepted is or human rights or are the human rights, and then you will have Quranic justification for human rights. This is what Muslims need, because as a Muslim, you can't go and tell a Muslim, just apply human rights. He will tell you, how come I apply human rights and forget Sharia law? Do you want me to go to hell forever, to be burned in hell forever? How can you save me from the paradise if I applied your human rights? Can you save me, from hell and make me go to paradise? So these people think differently. They need religious and Quranic justification for human rights, for the values of democracy and liberty. And then how things should work. It should start from here. Theologically based, peaceful understanding of Islam, which is possible.